Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the game plan this morning. My name is Gareth Soloway, Chief Market Strategist here at VerifiedInvesting.com. So markets are trading slightly higher today, coming off of a big rally yesterday. We are creeping to the all-time highs. We're coming up underneath a retrace of the wedge pattern to the scene of the crime. We're going to go over all of these charts, and I'll let you know what it means. In addition, there's some really interesting charts in the semiconductors. So today we have a shareholder meeting for NVIDIA. I wouldn't be shocked if nothing major is announced during that if you see a sell-off in the afternoon. So that shareholder meeting starts at noon Eastern time. And just like we see with Apple when they debut a new product, it's usually up, 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 up. And then once they debut that product, there's a sell the news event. So that could be a catalyst for selling in the semis this afternoon. And then in the after hours, we have Micron earnings. So Micron earnings, again, that stock actually filled a major gap fill and is very near another major resistance going into earnings after rallying over 100% off the April 7th lows. So interesting stuff going on there. In addition, today at 10 o'clock will be the second day in a row that Jerome Powell is testifying in front of Congress. So expect there could be some volatility right around 10 a.m. in the markets if he makes any specific comments on interest rates. All right, right now, markets are pricing in a September cut, although there is some chatter that if we get a weak jobs number coming into this next July month, we could see, again, late July, the Fed meeting. Maybe there's a small chance of a cut, essentially, if we get that weak labor market data. All right, into the charts we go here. Let's take a look. If we take a look at the S&P futures here, you can see that, again, this was yesterday's action. So, again, we opened, kind of popped up, fell back, then rallied most of the rest of the day with a little profit taking into the close. Overnight, a whole lot of chop. And then this morning, as very often we've seen of late, the market's gently floating higher, going up and just kind of grinding. And that's where we are. Notice yesterday's high right here. We're trading just fractionally above that as of now. So we're not up a lot, but the markets continue to see a momentum-driven kind of chasing, FOMOing in type of environment here. Now, if we flip over to the S&P 500 itself, this is what we really want to talk about, right? So we have this trend line, which was the upper boundary of the wedge pattern. The lower boundary here, I put in a different color because I want you guys to notice that, again, the technical scene of the crime is a retrace back to that line, which actually coincides on the S&P with the all-time high. So right around 6150 would be a retrace to the scene of the crime. And again, what's the scene of the crime? Just to be clear on this, I'll draw on a trend line here for you, those of you that are newer to this. Then we'll do, all right, so you're hammering on this trend line up and down, up and down. Finally, we come down, we get a small bounce, and we break down. So that trend line was major support here, kept on causing the chart to bounce, right? Bounce, bounce. We break it, and then the retrace to the scene of the crime is to that specific trend line. So that's the one that you want to follow for to see if it gets rejected. So all in all, what we're really following here is this trend line here. Getting back into that would be the technical retrace. And it's just so interesting that it coincides basically with the all-time high, right? Right there. If we rally up into it again, right around 6150, that will be the spot to watch. So again, there's other trend lines to keep an eye on, like the one we pierced yesterday. But all in all, the retrace to the scene of the crime is the big one. If we flip over to the QQQ, again, that one is a little bit steeper here. So that's actually up a little bit more, which could tell us that the NASDAQ 100, meaning the mega cap trillion-dollar stocks, could see a little bit of additional momentum, even if the S&P begins to stall out. All right, so again, we'll keep an eye on that. But you can see on the QQQ, we actually tagged the all-time high. But this underbelly line here actually goes a little bit higher here, about $10 higher on the QQQ from where we closed yesterday. Quickly flashing over to the US dollar, it continues to hold technical support for now. I'm going to add in another green arrow just because it's getting a little bounce today. But just keep in mind that at some point, the more you hammer on this line, the weaker this line becomes. And these are all things that I discuss in the Winning Trader series and in the kind of educational side of verified investing here. And don't forget, folks, it is still Investment Empowerment Week. And so all those courses will remain on sale at 50% or greater the entire week. All right. So don't forget, by the end of this week or by this weekend, that sale will go away. If you're interested in the Winning Trader series, I think it's 55% off. Our biggest discount I believe we've ever done is 55% off. All right. So let's take a look here at the 10-year yield. I always check in on the 10-year and the dollar. I mean, a lot of investors don't do this, but I believe that these are instrumental in the market action and super important for the bigger kind of viewpoint of, is de-dollarization going on? Is big money still buying, or institutions or even foreign countries still buying our debt? These are all things we want to pay attention to. Look at yesterday. We finally broke down from this little short-term trend line on the 10-year yield. You are getting a bounce, but again, now this becomes minor resistance here. This is now your next target. So yeah, we could bounce up a little bit, but again, you do have minor resistance. Now, some of you may be saying, well, why is it just minor resistance? Great question. Again, all answered in the Winning Trader series, but I'll give you a simple answer now. This has not confirmed a breakdown. Once you confirm a breakdown, it becomes major resistance. When you don't confirm, and we haven't confirmed yet, it's a real breakdown. It's minor. The difference between major and minor resistance is that minor could be a fake out by big money. In other words, they could rug pull it on you if you think it's a real breakdown, and then they just rip it right back up. Versus major, once you get confirmation below a level, the odds, and remember, I deal in a world of probabilities here, the odds of it being a fake out by institutional money is very, very low, probably in the 20% zone. Versus when it's a minor level and you haven't confirmed, it's closer to like 50-50, 60-40. So there's still a decent chance that it could be a fake out. All important things to really understand if you're an investor or trader. All right, here we have the FedEx chart. FedEx reported earnings here. The stock is opening lower, or set to open lower. You can see, again, they reported earnings. The stock fell and is basically just chopped sideways in the lower range. It's not a huge move on FedEx. So the stock is down about 5% on the day. If you look at the chart, for me, there's this underbelly trend line right back here that's important. You can see, by the way, this was an awesome parallel. Look at this parallel, and then look at what happened when it broke. By the way, guys, let's look at this. All right, let's do a quick test of this. Here's your breakdown. Beautiful gap, by the way. That's called a river theory. Then what is this? When it goes back into this level, what's this called? A retrace to the scene of the crime, right? And then what happens? So you break down, retrace, and then it gets rejected. By the way, technically speaking, it never confirmed before the retrace. So this level was only minor, but it turned out to work anyways as price came down. And essentially finding this new level for today for me to trade, pivot low from back here in 2022 to the pivot low here. That gives us a general target today of about $200 on FedEx. So if FedEx dumps another $15 to $20, we get into that $200 range. That now becomes a key level, right? That would become a day tradable level. Would I swing trade it? Probably not, but it is day tradable. Micron, we talked about this. They report earnings after the bell. The stock is kind of wavering in the pre-market here. So it is up a little bit here near 128, but it's not a big move by any stretch. And then if we flip back to the daily chart, this was a gap fill here at 127.50. And then if you go above, notice the range I've drawn in here. That is a range up to about 130. So this is huge resistance. If I had to put my money on something, I would say generally I would expect a pullback on Micron's earnings just because it's had such an extended rally up into the earnings announcement. So expectations are very, very high. Doesn't mean it will pull back. But that, again, if you said, hey, listen, you got to make a choice on this one way or the other, I would say, all right, well, I would choose the under, in other words, the pullback zone. Robinhood continues to move higher here, but interesting, it is coming into some resistance around 85 up here. So this is going to be very, very interesting. One of the things that I was just talking about with my traders in the trading room before I started the game plan is that we really see a momentum shift, right? So we had Circle again. If you've been under a rock, maybe you didn't see Circle rallying over the last 3 weeks since the IPO. It went from an IPO of $31 all the way up to basically 300. Now it's pulling back towards 200. So there was a momentum where money was flooding in from retail into that stock just massively. Now that's pulling back, and we've seen a shift of that money now looking for the next hot play. And Robinhood over the last few days has really taken off. Now, 85 should be a key level on Robinhood to watch. So let's watch that today. But also we're seeing Coinbase be a recipient of this momentum as well. All right, Coinbase, we heard from Coinbase about, potentially tokenization of stocks, which essentially is stock trading, but using a derivative. And again, we could see Coinbase is trading up here in the pre-market. Look at this run on Coinbase just since that announcement. Now, again, my thesis is that longer term, and this is more of a longer term thesis, is that if Coinbase gets into stock investing with tokenization kind of stuff, it actually would be a big negative for Robinhood, as it would be their major competitor in the same demographic. And again, Robinhood generally caters to the younger generations, and also Coinbase does as well with the crypto side. So you start introducing stock trading, who's losing out here? Probably Robinhood loses out some. So just an interesting thought process here. Now, looking at Coinbase, guys, Coinbase, I do have a major level of resistance around 368 to 369 right up here. This is a pivot point here going back to 2021 November. Interestingly enough, that's when Bitcoin topped in 2021. Now, again, you can see when it IPO'd, it wasn't, briefly on the IPO. So just to be clear, you can see it ran up all the way to 430 when it IPO'd, when Coinbase IPO'd, but then it backed off very quickly. Then crypto made the high here. And ultimately, again, then we had the big collapse, and we're approaching that. So that's going to be an interesting level on Coinbase for a potential short right around that 368, 369, 370 level today that I am keeping my eye on. Speaking of Robinhood, by the way, the reason 85 is important, not only this upsloping trend line, but if we zoom out here, and I'll erase these other lines to just keep it as clear as possible. When Robinhood IPO'd, it initially had this crazy pop up, and it put in a major high at what price? $85 a share. So again, right here, Robinhood, which is, by the way, pre-market trading right around this 85 level, that would then be a double top. Now, usually double tops, you'll see a pierce of it. So it'll go above briefly, but oftentimes then in the coming days, you would see a pullback on Robinhood. All right, off to the semis. Take a look at this, guys, the SMH this morning. If we take a look at the SMH creeping up towards this trend line here. Let me go to the pre-market data. There we go. In fact, we are piercing it as we speak. Look at that, folks. Right there. Now, the reason why this level is important, if we go back to the daily chart, this is a major gap fill that has not been filled until it looks like at the open today. And again, that is right at that 273.60 level, give or take, right in this vicinity. And you can see, again, the gap fill right there. So here we got close, and then you had the big drop in late March, early April, right? So from February to March to early April. Now we've come back, and we're just about to fill that gap. If it gets through gap fill, you have double top. But gap fill is a very interesting level, especially with the shareholder meeting today for NVIDIA and then Micron earnings after the bell. Very curious to see where this SMH is tomorrow morning when I do the game plan. Is it able to punch through and head towards double top, or does the gap fill work as a major resistance level with these ancillary factors of the shareholder meeting for NVIDIA as well as the Micron earnings? All right, flipping over to Bitcoin. Bitcoin pushing up. Again, risk on in the market. We see the stock market moving up, closing in on all-time highs. Bitcoin is moving up. Now, Bitcoin is making lower highs here, or right here, high, lower high, but doesn't mean it can't push through. We are back above this little level. The one next level I'm now watching on this is this downsloping line here. So Bitcoin will meet its next resistance at around 109,500, 109,500 to 110,000. If it can punch through there, you have a shot at making a new high just around the 113,000 level. But again, I strongly encourage everyone that's into trading Bitcoin. Long-term hodlers, this doesn't matter, right? I mean, if you're long-term, I still like Bitcoin longer term. But shorter term investors, you got to watch the stock market. As long as the stock market's going up, Bitcoin should grind higher. If the stock market stalls out, that's where trouble can arise, as we've seen in recent history on Bitcoin. Gold today, let's take a look at gold. Gold inching a little bit lower, although hasn't taken out yesterday's lows. The big level on gold is not too far away, $3,280, $3,280. That'll be a test of this trend line. And if it does test, then does it break and confirm? If it breaks and confirms, you'll have some support around 31.25 and then 29.60 or so. So again, things to watch there. Obviously, overall, the longer term, even if we go to 29.60, you'll hear a lot of bears coming out of the woodwork. But I think it's important to put it in perspective. Even a pullback to 29.60 is here only. And look at the uptrend that we've had, right? So, I mean, that would only be, I mean, if we look at a Fibonacci and we just do it from the beginning of the bull market move here, that's not even a 382 Fibonacci retrace, which would be around 2,800 on gold. So again, keep it in perspective. Short term, a break of that trend line on the daily chart right here at 3280. Yeah, you could go down, to 3,100, maybe even below 3,000. But on the bigger time frame, the longer time frame tells us that it is still bullish on the charts. All right. Silver today. Remember, silver had that breakout, but then kind of stalled out, which was disappointing. But in all fairness, I haven't bought it yet. I sold my position up in this range. Then it looked like it was breaking out. And I said, guys, I'm going to wait for this 34.50 area. And honestly, maybe we'll get it. Maybe we'll get that pullback. I still like silver for going higher, but I'm just trying to be a disciplined investor. And if I miss it, I miss it. But still 34.50 is my level to watch. So yesterday I did exit all of my oil short. I took half off the table on this dip here and then the rest over in this range. And then you know what I did? I flipped it into a long. Why? Because the chart told me to. Remember, emotion means nothing in trading. It's all about the charts. And this had me shorting up in this range. And a lot of people said, oh, he's crazy to do that. But that's emotion speaking. Charts were telling me, no, that's a short. And then as it comes in, all right, we've made our money on the short. Now I think we're due for a little bit of a bounce on oil. And so right here, look at this, retrace right here to this level. You almost had like a little inverse head and shoulders. Do you guys see that? I'll draw it in if you don't see that, but this is a great bullish pattern right here. There's your head. And we talked about it, how it's a little wonky, but still, I mean, you can still kind of make it out. And then the breakout right here. And now it's retraced to essentially the neckline of the inverse head and shoulders. And that, again, is a buy. Now, I want to be clear on this. This isn't something that I'm looking for oil to go back here or higher. This is just a shorter term bounce, maybe back to $68 a barrel. I grab my short term money and I say thank you very much. All right, next up, natural gas. What a drop on that. Take a look, guys. Look at where it is. I actually think natural gas could be due for a little bounce here. I still think longer term it's going lower, but could a bounce come in? Look at, again, 4 days now down in a row. Here's two trend lines. We're right in the midst of them. There should be some support here on nat gas for a potential bounce back. But again, same thing like oil, small bounce. And then my guess is we head lower on the charts. All right. So again, just lots going on here today and a lot of different angles here. We obviously have Jerome Powell. And by the way, we have also new home sales at 10 o'clock, which kind of get overshadowed by everything else going on. But, new home sales, it's not going to be hugely market moving, but it will give us insight into the housing market, which is pretty horrendous right now, if you're kind of tuned into that. But then Jerome Powell speaking, shareholder meeting for NVIDIA, and then Micron earnings. That's the big events throughout the day. And obviously, we always have to keep an eye out for Truth Social posts by the president, and also any upheaval in the Middle East, any kind of resumption of tensions and missiles being launched type of stuff. All right, you guys have a great rest of your day. I got to get to my trading room. Don't forget, the courses are 50% or greater off. Learn to fish, guys. Again, in the services, I give fish. I give the trades. My traders give trades. But ultimately, like I always say, there'll be a day where I hang it up and I say, okay, I'm going to retire. And my goal is to make sure as many of you as possible know how to do what I do as well as I do. And it's possible. Trust me, my IQ is average. It's not beyond anything else. If I can do it, anyone can do it. And the key is just practicing it and learning it. Amazing. It'll change your life. Ask anyone who's really taken this stuff. All right. On that note, you guys have a great rest of your day. Let's go make some money. Take care.